Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Hardikar, colleagues, Dr. Sanjay Phadke, and Dr. Ketkar, madam. For doing all this, we need to survive first, so heart has to be protected. So, why we are talking of this particular topic today on yoga specifically? Because any lectures of this kind will begin with the first sentence as the risk of myocardial infarctions is increasing day by day, the diabetes mellitus is increasing rapidly, and we are seeing more and more younger people landing up with both these complications. So this is where cardiometabolic risk comes in, and all of you know that despite maximal medical treatment, so many advances in intervention, so many advances in medicines, still we continue to have a large mortality and morbidity, of course, which reduces the life working hours. That continues to be there, so there has to be some more ways to kind of improve this and get a better quality of life and better productive life. So what do I mean by cardiometabolic risk? See, basically, it's a continuum of illnesses or various factors, metabolic as well as physical factors, which have been shown to increase the risk of getting into a heart attack. The basic pathology of this is insulin resistance, and that comes from our irregular or bad diet habits, bad lifestyle. What it results into is various parameters. The first one is blood pressure, which is more systolic and diastolic. Dyslipidemias, that means your cholesterols are abnormal, predominantly more triglycerides and low HDL. HDL, as all of you are aware, is more of a protective kind of cholesterol. Simultaneously, you can have raised LDL and total cholesterol, but predominantly it's more of a high triglyceride and low HDL cholesterol. Obesity, which can be diagnosed or defined by a body mass index of more than 30, or more commonly or more importantly, which is easily measurable and which is generally not commonly practiced, is waist girth, which is more. So the waist hip ratio is more than 1 or 0.9, especially if you are more scientific. Then impaired glucose tolerance. This is where the insulin resistance comes in. It's basically insulin resistance causes improper handling of glucose in the circulation, which doesn't find its way into the cell. So the levels of glucose will be increased, and that is because the cell is not responding to the stimulus of insulin to take that glucose inside the cell. So we have impaired glucose tolerance, or ultimately we may land up with overt diabetes mellitus. So fasting glucose more than 110 is an important risk factor for cardiometabolic diseases, and ultimately it will lead into microalbuminuria, which will mean the renal dysfunction has already started. Now this microalbuminuria has been recently introduced into this cluster of findings for cardiometabolic risk. So global cardiometabolic risk represents the overall risk of developing not only diabetes but also cardiovascular diseases. Today, if you understand and realize, diabetes is taken as equivalent of coronary artery disease. So the two is actually a continuum. The vascular injury or vascular disease goes hand in hand. So the risk of developing diabetes as well as cardiovascular risk is taken together, and that is what comes from the cardiometabolic risk. And the classic risk factors, as you know, smoking, high LDL, blood pressure, glucose are there. But apart from that, the metabolic risk factors, as we mentioned in the last slide, are improper handling of glucose by the body because of insulin resistance. So it's basically a continuum of various risk factors like high blood pressure, high triglycerides, all these I mentioned, low HDL. Ultimately, this is going to cause inflammatory markers to rise, which are going to traumatize the inside lining of the blood vessels, causing more atheroma formation, elevated blood glucose. The basic pathology is, of course, the insulin resistance, and both the end results, that is diabetes and cardiovascular disease, go hand in hand because of this cardiometabolic risk. So despite therapeutic advances which have happened, the diabetes risk of diabetes and risk of coronary artery disease still continues. It has not become zero, although it has improved, but it has not become zero. So there is still continuing to be a significant risk of developing both these diseases. So this is what will be called as a residual cardiovascular risk. Now in cardiology, the significant advances were made in terms of coronary artery disease or ischemic heart disease when the statins got introduced which significantly reduced the LDL cholesterol, and with that ischemic heart disease mortality came down drastically. But despite the maximum doses and newer molecules which have come up, still there is continuing to be nearly 20% risk that patients still will continue to get myocardial infarctions or coronary artery disease. So targeting cardiometabolic risk, the important aspect, as I told you, is basically insulin resistance, which actually comes from this peculiar type of fat distribution. So that's what causes the waist circumference to go higher than the hip circumference. Now the fat is distributed in the peritoneal spaces and in the abdominal organs. This causes more of an inflammatory reaction, so that releases this free fatty acids, TNF alpha. All these inflammatory markers will be raised, and that is going to be injurious to various vascular systems. So basically, this abnormal fat distribution is happening because the body is not able to handle that insulin, handle that glucose to take it into the cell because of insulin resistance. So these are the factors which finally we have got defined as abdominal obesity. Therefore, the guidelines will tell you as to what should be the ideal waist circumference. And this is these are the two different bodies or two different organizations which will tell you what level we should be working at. But ATP3 is a little more lenient, and International Diabetes Federation is more stricter, especially in Indian population or Southeast Asians. We should be more strict, especially for this particular category. We should have a lower waist circumference. So this is that's why I mentioned you that this is the easiest way to measure, which will tell you whether you are suffering from cardiometabolic risk. So abdominal obesity in measured by waist circumference will be the risk factor for various markers finally, which will be elevated LDL cholesterol, elevated triglyceride, low HDL cholesterol, blood pressure, and elevated fasting glucose. So all these parameters will be significantly altered or pathological if you have a raised waist circumference. So intra-abdominal obesity or adiposity is a major contributor to increased cardiometabolic risk. So free fatty acids, all the markers of inflammation will be there that will ultimately cause dyslipidemia. Insulin resistance, as we mentioned, is a primary crux, and inflammation, and ultimately leading to the risk of increasing diabetes and increasing coronary artery disease. So targeting cardiometabolic risk, we have to target abdominal obesity, glucose intolerance, and insulin resistance, which is coming basically from insulin resistance. Ultimately, these are also going to cause hypertension, that is raised systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and dyslipidemia. All these factors are ultimately going to cause cardiovascular diseases. This again mentions the same thing. Various risk factors are there, various inflammatory markers are there, and you have to ultimately get over those risk factors. The basic pathology has started from insulin resistance. So clinical conditions which can ultimately happen is type 2 diabetes mellitus, essential hypertension. Now PCOD or PCOS, a very common clinical diagnosis seen in today's date. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, if you go through the ultrasound of normal population, let us say, you will have finding of fatty liver in nearly 70% of the ultrasounds today. Sleep apnea, a major epidemic I would say right now happening. The classic features are the spouse will tell you that you are snoring at night and not sleeping well, and daytime the people may be just feeling sleepy, groggy, not active. So this is an important diagnosis, and this has caused increased risk of hypertension, cardiac arrhythmias, and myocardial infarctions. Cardiovascular diseases, all of us are aware, myocardial infarction. Now cardiovascular does not mean only coronary artery disease and myocardial infarction, it also means risk of peripheral vascular disease and strokes, that is cerebrovascular disease. The cancers, we know that cancers are increasing rapidly. So we need to manage all these risk factors, that is obesity, glucose intolerance, insulin resistance, lipids. That means we have to bring the lipids under good control by various means, hypertension. So minimize the risk, all these risk factors, to reduce the risk of diabetes and coronary artery disease. So insulin resistance is the primary pathology which has caused all these problems. Metabolic syndrome is a kind of a precursor, or maybe you can call it as mini diabetes, where all these risk factors are there, but patient has not developed over diabetes, but the risk of cardiovascular disease continues to be nearly the same. What is important lifestyle modification you can have? Weight loss by various dietary and exercise controls, and exercise. Now both these have been conclusively proven to reduce the cardiometabolic risk, that means risk of developing coronary artery disease and diabetes. So it improves exercise, regular exercise, improves cardiovascular fitness, reduces weight, increases sensitivity. This has been proven. So it increases sensitivity to insulin. That means insulin resistance has gone down and your cardiometabolic risk has gone down. It reduces the incidence of diabetes. So insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity increases, the risk of diabetes will also go down. Weight loss also has a similar effect, and how you achieve it is also important. So many people just end up doing starvation and end up getting weight loss. That's not a proper weight loss. You have to have proper weight loss by good exercise. So brisk walking for at least 30 minutes a day is what is recommended right now today. Various organizations will tell you that at least 30 to 40 minutes of brisk walk at least 5 times a week will improve your chances of getting into good kind of life. Diabetes control, every 1% rise in HbA1c has a significant increase, that is 18%. That's a phenomenal, mind-boggling risk of coronary artery disease is increased. Also, similar increase, which is not commonly diagnosed today, but peripheral arterial disease also. So, diabetes control is really important. So, just 1 gram percent rise. So, if you reduce that by 1 gram percent, your risk has significantly reduced already. So, what is your aim? Pre-meal, that is fasting sugar, should be less than 110, post-meal should be less than 180, and now we are talking of HbA1c of 7. We are not targeting it to 6 or 6.5, we are not targeting it to less than 7. Why? Because if you are very strict, then you have chances of developing hypoglycemia and increasing the risk. So even these targets are really difficult to control. For BP, what are the targets? We should be less than 130 by 80. The risk of cerebrovascular disease and coronary artery disease increases with the risk of rising blood pressure. The risk of cardiovascular disease increases not only additional times but multiple times if two coexist. If diabetes and blood pressure coexist, then the risk actually multiplies. So therefore, if you have presence of both these two together, especially in cardiometabolic risk, then the risk of coronary artery disease has multiplied significantly. So controlling both diabetes and blood pressure is really the crux of preventing coronary artery disease if you really want to have a protected life. Lipid control has already been proven to be effective in reducing the risk by about 25 to 40%. So statins was the crux or cornerstone of therapy, and that have various statin trials. Now all these are long-term trials. These are like 2 years, 5 years. So long-term trials have shown that there is a 25 to 40% risk reduction in coronary artery disease if you control your lipids. Various means, but most commonly with statins, to LDL less than 70 now, and we are talking of LDL less than 70 as our target. Triglyceride should be less than 40, and HDL, which is good cholesterol or protective cholesterol, should be more than 40. Unfortunately, rising or increasing your HDL cholesterol is difficult pharmacologically, but the way you can increase it either by giving infusions of HDL, which has not been proven to be effective. So only increase in HDL cholesterol, which happens with exercise, has been shown to be protective. So infusing HDL cholesterol does not protect you, and getting it up by natural means, most commonly by good regular exercise, is really protective. Now the benefit of exercises have been proven beyond doubt. Significant improvement in your risk profile, that is insulin resistance, weight control, diabetes control, blood pressure control, has been proven. Now all of us are aware of various aerobic kind of exercises, walking, swimming, whatever, all sorts of exercises have been there. Now why we are talking of yoga today? Now yoga has certain benefits over and above the usual standard aerobic kind of exercise. Now yoga, as Dr. Sanjay has mentioned and Dr. Leena will be talking to you later on, it's a mind-body kind of exercise. It's not just a body exercise, it's not just postures, it's not just stretching your body, but it's a mind-body exercise where relaxation is equally or at times maybe more important. It gives you a physio-psychological benefits. It's not just a physical benefit, it's a physio-psychological benefit. And that's where the benefits of yoga stand over and above the standard aerobic kind of exercise. Why do we see so? The yoga can modulate our autonomic nervous system. Now, autonomic nervous system, as we are aware, that is sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, plays an important role in controlling various metabolisms of our body, especially in heart, where one of the important factors of getting your cardiovascular mortality less is by reducing the heart rate and the blood pressure. So this is where this parasympathetic nervous system comes into play. Normally, this is something which can be seen after, as you were asking some time back, as to what duration of exercise. Although these physiological benefits like reducing blood pressure, reducing cholesterol have been seen as early as 14 days, but to get this psychological or autonomic nervous system benefits, one has to have at least certain duration of exercise, of practicing proper yoga. You know, it's not like you do it one day and for the rest of the week you are not doing it. So consistent practice of, let us say, 52 hours. So now 52 hours you cannot do in 1 day or 2 days. Every day, but everybody has a limited capacity to do whatever exercise he can. So practically we are talking of regular exercise of 20 to 30 minutes, and then ultimately the benefits will come, or measurable benefits will start coming after about 6 weeks or 6 months of practice. So this is what is being aimed at when we are talking of yoga. Classically, are there any measures? Yes, we have now come to this particular technique which is called as heart rate variability, which tells us about the balance between the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. This is a measure of autonomic nervous system, and you need to have the benefits documented by this particular. So you can have a study where you can have a normal person who is not exercising, and then after training, what is the difference which has been happening in that. It has positive impact on neuroendocrine status. That means the various hormones which are being secreted, the levels of those hormones, the timing of those hormones are also going to improve, and that is going to improve ultimately your cardiovascular function. The stress, as we keep saying nowadays in cardiovascular diseases or coronary diseases, stress is an important risk factor for getting into myocardial infarction, and yoga has significant beneficial effects on stress. So the level of stress comes down. If there is a stressful stimulus, now we are humans, we are going to react to that stress. So once you have a stressful stimulus, once that stimulus is taken out, coming back to baseline is going to be faster and more complete. Whereas a person who is not practicing yoga, the stimulus, even after the stimulus has been removed, the effects of stress, which is by increased oxygen consumption, which is measured by, there have been some studies who have measured this oxygen consumption, and the level persists, or it takes a much longer time and it does not come to baseline. Now this is what happens. So when there is stressful stimulus, the person who is doing yoga, the minute ventilation increases, and it increases to the same extent as a non-exercising person. If required, it can go higher. So it has more range of activation if person is doing yoga. At the same time, the unnecessary stimulation by that stress is not there. So he comes back to baseline. So that means this overactivation of sympathetic system is not there for a longer period of time. So that is something which is going to protect him in the long run. So this is what the benefit of yoga is. It takes care of effects of yoga or effects of stress, and it brings it down to the baseline much faster and better manner. So this has been measured by oxygen consumption. The absence of the other benefits, I would say, is that absence of, as we were mentioning some time back, measurable side effects. Now, so there have been some cases where yoga people also have suffered from injuries, but that, as Sanjay was mentioning, it may not be proper yoga which was done, but at least grossly it doesn't have a measurable significant side effects. And additional collateral, not only cardiac, but additional collateral psychosocial benefits also will be there, lifestyle benefits will be there if you continue practicing yoga. So there have been studies in yoga. I won't mention the different studies because these have really been short studies. So, but studies have been there in insulin resistance, diabetes, coronary artery disease. The studies have been there. The studies have been for the primary prevention, normal volunteers or patients who have been suffering from disease. The classic study by Dean Ornish, which was maybe 20 years back, it came into vogue. He also had a part of his reversal heart disease program, part of it was yoga. But unfortunately or fortunately, although it received a lot of publicity, it was combination of everything together. It was diet, it was exercise, it was partly yoga, partly aerobic exercise, and medical therapy also. But then at least it saw the seeds of yoga in the management of modern day illnesses, and I think we should just build on that. So the studies, why I am not mentioning these are the really small studies, 10 volunteers, 20 volunteers. There have been a lot of meta-analysis, but all of these have been really very small studies. The sad part is, as we discussed, the minimum duration was calculated to be 52 hours, but then most of these studies have been like 10 days, 1 month or so. So there is no point in mentioning those studies right now, as we are still too raw or too junior in that particular category, and various parameters what they studied or the aspects what they studied was very heterogeneous. So we can't really draw strong conclusions from that. But at least today what we can see is that yoga is definitely a promising technique for those that what we can call as unmet need. There is still significant gap between what we achieve and what we have achieved today. So that gap, yoga has potential to fill that gap. Mind you, yoga is not a isolated standalone therapy. It has proven benefits as a complementary thing to what modern sciences are doing today. So it's a complementary thing. Nobody can say that I will cure your heart attack by yoga. That should not be the dictum. But then, yes, we should take help of yoga in whatever the unmet needs or whatever residual risk is there. Of course, it goes without saying that it has to be a proper yoga. Yoga, as we discussed, it's more of a relaxation than active muscular exercise. So if we do it proper yoga, that has significant potential benefits of reversing cardiometabolic diseases. Then some areas where the modern science does not have any therapy. I mean, the example could be this diastolic dysfunction. We don't have any therapy for diastolic dysfunction, and nowadays there are so many papers as to this is what the diastolic dysfunction will cause. There will be so many measures, but ultimately we have to treat it, and there is no treatment. So probably yoga can give some ray of hope there. And ultimately we are talking finally towards what is called as mind-body medicines. It's not just the medicines, but it has to be mind-body medicines. We should not look at body in isolation. It has to be a mind and body. Thank you.